Have you ever moved to a completely different place, not just down the street, but a new city, a new state, maybe a different country? And do you remember how strange it felt when people used different words, or you went to the grocery store and none of your favorite brands were there and you had to get used to a whole new world? I can remember when my husband and I moved from Michigan to Indiana, I thought I had moved to a different planet, and I still do sometimes. There's a young woman, a college student, her name is Natalie. She decided she would study abroad, and she chose Paris. Natalie grew up in Florida with her father, Ara, and her family, and Ara, her father, is Armenian, and his native language is Armenian, and so they always spoke Armenian in their family home. Now, when she announced that she was going to go to Paris to study for a semester, no one was happier and more excited than her father. He got out the old photograph albums and he pulled out a picture. You'll remember the kind. They're small, black and white, like a 3x3 with a white scalloped edge around it. Do you remember those pictures? He pulled one of those out and he said, "Look, this is my aunt, and see these two little girls? They're my cousins. They've got to be all grown up by now, and I'm pretty sure they settled in Paris." Natalie knew right away what her dad wanted her to do. He wanted her to find his long-lost relatives. And she said, "Daddy, you know I'm going to Paris to study, and I'm way too shy to be knocking on people's doors and asking them if they are related to me." Natalie went to Paris. She's so excited to go. And when she arrived, in the first couple of weeks, she became so deeply homesick. It was just overwhelming. Everything was different. The language barrier was so much worse than she had anticipated. And she began to wonder if she should just quit and just go home. That's the same place the Israelites are in our reading this morning, except they're definitely not in Paris. They're in the wilderness of sin. Now, how in the world did they get there? Let's go all the way back for a moment to Genesis chapter 12, because that's where the story about the Israelites begins, right? Abraham makes a covenant with God, and God says, "I will be your God and you will be my people. Look up at the sky, Abraham. Your descendants will be more numerous than the stars of the sky, and I will bless all people through you." It's a beautiful promise. A few generations go by, and all of the descendants of Abraham are enslaved in Egypt. They don't know this God. They've never been able to worship the God of their forefather Abraham. They've lived under the thumb of the Egyptians until God raises up someone named Moses. And Moses comes to set the people free, showing great signs and wonders, bringing the plagues on Egypt and bringing the people out of slavery. They see the Red Sea has split so they can cross on dry land, all kinds of miracles. There's a pillar of fire at night and a pillar of cloud by day. When the people are hungry, manna and quail are delivered to them, and it's absolutely amazing. And then they end up today in the place called the wilderness of sin. Now, that is not what you think. The word sin there does not mean that it's a place where everybody goes to do every bad thing they can think of. It's not a place of disobedience. It's not a place where everybody is just doing horrible things to one another. Sin in this reading is the name of a moon goddess. It's a name. Ancient people would never have made the connection with the word sin that we do. This is a moon goddess that was worshipped by the Egyptians, a moon goddess that the people of Israel knew about, and a goddess that probably, scholars think, Abraham's ancestors would have worshipped. Because every day they could look up at the sky and see the sun. Every night they would see the moon rise faithfully. And so they connected those two objects, the sun and the moon, with God. It was a sign of God's presence. Now, Sin, this moon goddess, has a symbol, and her symbol is a golden calf. Now, if you know your old Hebrew Bible stories, you'll know that a few chapters, maybe a little bit further from this reading today, Moses goes up on a mountain, hangs out with God for so long that the people think that they've both left town. And so they create this golden calf to worship. Now it kind of makes sense. This is a God that they already knew. It was the sign of this sin goddess. And it's probably her name is responsible for the name of Mount Sinai and the Sinai Peninsula, right? So there's a lot of history there. Now, what are the people doing in this place, this wilderness of sin? We tend to read this story and we concentrate on the two things that stood out to me when Cindy read it. We concentrate on the people being argumentative and testing God and demanding water. Or we concentrate on the miracle of water coming out of the rock. I'm going to suggest that this story is about something else. Because the very last line of the reading that Cindy shared with us says, "Is the Lord here with us or not?" That's what the people want to know. And the problem is that God has been present with them every step of the way. They've had manna every morning to gather. They've had quail when they needed it. They've seen the pillar of smoke and the pillar of fire. They saw the Red Sea divide. What happened? How can they say, is God here or not, after seeing all those signs and wonders? I think the reason is because the Israelites are a very anxious people. They have been enslaved for 400 years, the scripture tells us, and they bear in their bodies and in their psyche the marks of slavery. They have learned not to trust people who have power because powerful people will hurt them. And Moses has a lot of power. So it only makes sense that anxious people might attack the one that seems most powerful. People who, for 400 years, where was this God, right? Why now? Why bring us out of slavery now? Where was this God for 400 years of slavery? And so it only makes sense to me that these anxious people need to know that God is with them. And we need the same thing. I don't know if y'all have listened to the news in the last couple of weeks, but we are living in a crazy world. It is a different planet. People are living in areas that are just being bombed, and people are dying, people are starving, wars are continuing for years that should have stopped long ago or never happened. And many of us, we don't even know how to respond. And we need to know that God is with us. I read a statistic the other day that Generation Z, which I think is 18 to 30 years old right now, they are the least trustful of any generation. They do not trust any institutions, not government and not the church, because they have seen too much hypocrisy. They've seen too many abuses of power, and they just simply cannot trust. They need to know that God is holding us together. They need to know that God is present with us, that we are not alone. And that's what Natalie needs to know too. She is in Paris and she is feeling all alone, separated by distance from her family, separated from the people around her by language. And one morning she's walking the shops, the shopping district of Paris, and she's just kind of looking around, and she comes upon an Armenian church that is tucked in between two shops. And she feels drawn to this place, and she knows it's because she's hoping that if she goes to a service in this church, that she will hear her first language. She will hear Armenian being spoken. And so she goes to a service, and she walks into the back of the church and sits in the back row. And her heart is just broken all over again when the service begins, and it's all in French. So she begins to look around. Can she sneak back out and not cause a disruption? Because she definitely doesn't want to be here if she can't hear the words of comfort in her own language. And as she is pondering how to escape, she notices a woman who has come in the back, an older woman, who walks in and walks down the aisle as if she's looking for a seat. And several people say to this woman in French, "Would you like to sit?" And she just keeps walking. She gets partway up the aisle, and then she turns and goes back. So now she's coming back towards Natalie. And when she gets to Natalie's row, Natalie stood up and said in Armenian, "Would you like to sit?" And the woman nodded yes, and she sat next to her. So now Natalie is trapped, right? She cannot get out of her row. She's got to stay for the whole service. And every now and then she sneaks a glance at the lady next to her and catches the lady sneaking a glance over at her. And when everybody stood up to go forward for communion, the woman leans to Natalie and she said, "You're not from here, are you?" And Natalie laughed and she said, "No, how did you know?" And the woman said, "Because we're speaking in my native language, Armenian. You did not speak to me in French. I don't know French." And Natalie said, "I'm actually from Florida." And the woman said, "Oh, I have a nephew I think is in Florida. His name is Ara." And Natalie said, "That's my dad." And right at that moment, the people in the pews in front of them turned around and shushed them loudly. Because it doesn't matter if God is showing up in the pew, you be quiet in church and don't disrupt the service. But the people around them, around this long-lost aunt and Natalie, those who could understand a little Armenian, their eyes were filling with tears because they knew that something really special was happening right there in that back row. Natalie later went to her aunt's house, had a meal, met those two little girls who had indeed grown up and was able to call her dad and say, "Guess who I met today? You'll never believe what happened." And the aunt said, "This is God's work. This is all God's work." We all need to feel moments of connection like that can't have happened any other way, that are just so strange. Call them miracle or coincidence. We need those moments. And the Israelites needed a moment like that. They're in a strange place. It's not a place they ever wanted to be. And now they're camping and there's no water and they don't know if they can trust this God, and they don't trust that guy Moses. Not yet. And it's going to take a while. They need to feel the presence of God. And I don't think that's a bad thing. We can talk about how those people grumbled and complained and quarreled, but I think we'd have done the same. Moses takes the rod, the same rod that when they struck the Nile, the water became undrinkable. And he takes the elders, and I believe this is important. The elders go with Moses because they need to know this is not Moses who has the power. This is God's power. And Moses strikes the rock and water flows. So the people can be reassured that this is a God who travels with them, who knows their suffering, who does not leave them, but is right there with them. Now, was that a miracle? Does water come from rocks, David? I did 5 minutes of Google research. So you may want to ask all of your geology questions to David after church. But many kinds of rocks, they are porous. And if you can break the crust on the outside, the water will be released. So is this a miracle? Maybe. Is it a miracle that Natalie happened to go into the church and her aunt happened to sit next to her? Is that a miracle? Does it matter? If God shows up, does it matter what we call it? Does it matter if we try to make it fit scientifically? I mean, come on. Which rock would Moses have struck, right? He struck the right one. And did Natalie actually have to go into the church? She could have said, "Nah, I'm just going to go home. I'm done." But they created space where God could move. They created space for the presence of God. And when we are anxious people, that's the thing that we resist doing. We're going to hold on to what we know, and we're going to power through, and we're going to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and we're going to do all the right things when God is maybe saying, just stop for a minute. Take a detour into this little church. Take the elders of the church out a little ways away from the camp and create a space where God can show that presence that we so need to see. that presence that we know is there by faith, but we don't often experience. So this week, what I'm hoping you will do, two things maybe. First, can you remember times when God showed up in your life in a way that you cannot deny, that something happened, and there's no way you could explain it? And don't even try to explain it. Enjoy it. Savor it. Tell other people about those moments. The Israelites will learn to do that as they tell their history again and again and again, and the Jewish people will celebrate these stories from Exodus because they know that it tells them that God is with them and that they are a people. This week, maybe you can carve out some space, some quiet time, just a moment. Maybe you turn into a different place, take a different road, do something out of the ordinary, and create a space where God's presence can appear. We can do that. It's intentional. We don't have to wait for God to strike us with a lightning bolt. Let us hope that does not happen, because I love you all, and I don't want that to happen to you. But I do want you to experience God's presence, maybe not quite so violently. So what can you do this week to make that little space just for God, just for you to feel that presence? Amen.